Hey guys, it's Miss Maggie, and today we did the scene from our play Bird Woman, the story of Sakakawea by Rick Averill, called The Vote. And that story talked about enfranchisement, and we've talked a little bit about what that means, that York and Sokka get the right to vote on the expedition at the end. But in order to really feel what disenfranchisement means, in order to feel what enfranchisement means, we need to talk about disenfranchisement and like why it was such a big deal that York got the right to vote in 1803 on that expedition, but then also understand how it feels when you don't have the right to vote. And so in planning for this, I grabbed this story that Lexi's mom got me for interlibrary loan that I think you guys will really love. It's called Granddaddy's Turn, A Journey to the Ballot Box by Michael S. Bandy and Eric Stein, and it's illustrated by James E. Ransom. And part of the reason that I think you guys will totally dig this book is that it's kind of interesting to imagine that this man, the main character, Granddaddy, so it's part of the greater story of American history that is Black history, and to imagine that York getting the right to vote in 1803, imagine that this is his great-grandson, not born into slavery but living after that and fighting for Black Americans to get the right to vote. So I'm hoping that you'll find this book as heart-wrenching as I did, and I was surprised by the ending. I want to see if you guys are too. So let's check it out. Granddaddy's Turn. Granddaddy's Turn, A Journey to the Ballot Box by Michael S. Bandy and Eric Stein, illustrated by James E. Ransom. Where we lived, I didn't need an alarm clock. I woke up to the cock-a-doodle-doo of my pet rooster and the chugga-chugga-chugga of my granddaddy's tractor. Okay, I'll try those again. Cock-a-doodle-doo of my pet rooster and the chugga-chugga-chugga-chugga of my granddaddy's tractor. Hurry up, boy, he would shout. I'm coming, Granddaddy, I would say. We got work to do, my granddaddy would say. Hard work will keep you out of trouble. I guess he figured I was going to get into a whole passel of trouble because he sure gave me lots of chores. We fed the animals, we milked the cows, and we worked in the fields. My granddaddy was a big, strong man who always said he didn't take nothing off nobody. He could do anything. Plow fields, chop wood, and dig fence posts, all without breaking a sweat. Not like me. Sometimes when I did my chores, I made so much sweat. It was like I was raining. It was like I was raining, yeah. We worked together a lot, but we played together a lot too. We really loved to go fishing. Sometimes Mine would complain when I didn't get a bite right away, but my granddaddy always said, "Patience, son, patience." One morning, we were eating breakfast. My grandmother brought out a surprise for my granddaddy. She had cleaned and ironed his suit. I didn't understand that, since he only wore his suit to church, and it wasn't a church day. "It's our time, and you got to look your best," my grandma said. My granddaddy was so excited. Hey, sweetie. I'm doing a quick story. Say hi.
Hi.
Love you. Have fun at Kid Fit. My granddaddy was so excited, he leapt up from the table and gave her a big hug. "What's going on, Granddaddy?" I asked. "You'll see," he said with a beaming smile. I didn't like neckties too much, but since my granddaddy was wearing one, I guess I was too. "Y'all be careful now," my grandma said, "and don't forget to take pictures," she said as she handed my granddaddy the camera. We walked and walked. It seemed like 100 miles. I asked my granddaddy where we were going again. "Patience, son, patience," he reminded me with a smile. Oh boy, I thought, we must be going to the county fair. I walked faster. I couldn't wait to get there. I could almost hear the music and smell the barbecue. "Where are all the rides and animals?" I asked my granddaddy. He laughed and said, "What are you talking about, son?" "I thought we were going to the county fair," I said. "Take a look around," my granddaddy said. "This is better than an old fair." Then we saw the "Vote Here" sign and shouted to my granddaddy, "Are you voting today?" "Yes, I am," my granddaddy replied quietly. Nobody in my family had ever voted before. Where we lived, some people were allowed to vote, and some people were not. I never knew anyone who had voted before, but I heard my teacher say that some new laws had changed all that. I hoped that was true, because I didn't want to get us in trouble. Want us to get in trouble. It felt like we were standing in line forever, and every time we seemed to get a little closer, someone would cut in line in front of us. That's just how things worked where we lived. It didn't seem to bother my granddaddy, though. He said, "Patience, son. Takes patience to get what you've got coming to you." When we finally got to the front of the line, my granddaddy proudly signed a paper and was handed a ballot. He clutched the ballot to his chest and said, "Son, this is the happiest day of my life." I took the camera from him and said, "Smile, Granddaddy." "Now come on, let's go vote," he said. But before we could even walk to the voting booth, a deputy stopped us and asked my granddaddy, "What you doing, Uncle?" Where we lived, if the white folks didn't know your name, they usually called you either Uncle or George, and Auntie if you were a lady. "I'm voting today, sir," my granddaddy replied. The deputy got out a big, thick book and slammed it on the table. He opened it to a page with words that looked longer than crawfish. "Can you read this, Uncle?" the deputy asked. My granddaddy just stared at the pages and shook his head. "No, sir, I can't," he replied. The deputy slammed the book shut, saying, "Well, Uncle, if you can't read this, then you can't vote." He tore up my granddaddy's ballot and threw it on the ground. I was pretty sure that man wasn't playing by the rules, but he was in charge. I could see my granddaddy was mad. As we headed back down the road toward home, my granddaddy didn't say a word, but I saw something I'd never seen before. My big, strong granddaddy had tears in his eyes. "Don't worry, Granddaddy, I'll vote for you one day," I said to him. Granddaddy passed away before he ever got a chance to vote. I never forgot that day he tried to vote. My granddaddy was so mad he might have lost his temper, but he knew better than me how important that day was. Even though it wasn't his time to vote, that day, he looked to the future. When I went to vote for the first time, I remembered what my granddaddy always said. "Patience, son, patience." He was right. That day finally came, and I knew, just like my granddaddy, I would never take it for granted. With his picture in my hand, I put my ballot in the box, smiled, and said to myself, "Now it's Granddaddy's turn." In the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights movement helped dismantle the walls of racial segregation in the United States brick by brick, from interstate transportation to access to education to the desegregation of public accommodations and housing. The last vestige of resistance in this struggle was voting rights. The pro-segregation establishment clearly understood the power of the vote. The concept of one person, one vote has always been the key to significant political and social change, a change that segregationists were not always going to concede without a fight. Or were not going to concede without a fight. Politically sanctioned nullification of voter rights was commonplace in Alabama and many other southern states. African American citizens were subject to various unethical methods of voter suppression, including poll taxes and birth record challenges. Perhaps the worst of these tactics were what Granddaddy had, the so-called literacy tests. These tests were usually administered by the polling officials toward any individual who was considered undesirable. The potential voter was handed a booklet or pamphlet, which was often consisted of difficult Elizabethan text, that's like from Shakespeare, which would be hard for us to read, or complex legal language. The voter was asked to read the document aloud and to explain in detail to the polling official what the passages meant. If the explanation was not deemed up to par, the voter was dismissed and not allowed to vote. Through these tactics, thousands of individuals were denied their constitutional right to vote. Many were also harassed or hurt, and some were even killed. Fortunately, these practices ultimately stopped with the passage of 1965 Voting Rights Act, landmark legislation signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that book. I hope you can think about how it applies to disenfranchisement and to enfranchisement, and are maybe getting a better understanding of how important it was for Sakakawea and York to get that vote on that day in, I don't think it was actually 1803 because they'd been on the expedition for a couple of years, so maybe it's 1805. But yeah, it's a really big scene we get to act out, and I'm honored to get to do it with you guys, and I hope you always cherish your right to vote. All right, thanks guys. Bye.